In this episode, which is part 2 to episode 5, the composition of systems, we will summarize points in part 1, while providing a more comprehensive breakdown of the architecture of systems and the architecture of FBA civilization and sovereignty. As stated, when it comes to Black freedom, economic independence, and sovereignty, the enemy has programmed Black minds that they are just too intellectually inferior to build a civilization of their own. The architecture of Black civilization, however, is simple because melanated people are literally walking around with the universe's blueprint already encoded in their biology. The same principles that govern melanin molecules, ancient pyramids, and computer systems are the exact principles needed to build economies, institutions, and societies. The enemy makes it seem complex by scrambling our cognitive architecture through trauma, miseducation, and chemical warfare, which convinces us that we need their approval, their expertise, and their systems to survive. When you walk into a building, you see walls, floors, ceilings, physical architecture. What you don't see is the blueprint that came before the building. The design, the mathematical principles, the engineering calculations, the cognitive architecture that had to exist in someone's mind before the first brick was laid. Here's what they don't teach you. Your mind operates the same way. Before you can build a successful life, a thriving business, a powerful community, or a liberated people, you must first have the correct cognitive architecture, the proper way of thinking, perceiving, and processing reality. When it comes to Black people being the atoms of civilization, here's what they really don't teach you. There's a direct, measurable connection between how melanin molecules are structured, how ancient civilizations built their temples and pyramids, how computer systems operate, and how your melanated mind naturally functions. They're all the same blueprint, the same sacred geometry, the same fundamental laws. But there's a problem. The system of white supremacy has deployed MKUltra tactics and psychological warfare to distort our cognitive architecture. They've scrambled our mental blueprints, so we can't think clearly, can't build properly, or organize effectively. We must illuminate the connection between the apparatus of consciousness and the apparatus of physical construction, between thinking and architecture, between melanin and mathematics. We must learn how restoring proper cognitive architecture is just as vital as building proper physical architecture. Everything in existence operates according to 7 fundamental laws. The ancient Egyptians knew them. The ancient Kemetic scientists encoded them. They're called the 7 Hermetic Principles, and they govern everything from atoms to galaxies to human consciousness to economic systems. To reiterate these laws from episode 1, they are the law of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This means reality begins with consciousness. Your thoughts literally create your world. Before any physical thing exists, it must first exist as a mental construct. The law of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. This means the patterns that govern the macrocosm also govern the microcosm. The same principles that organize galaxies also organize atoms. The same laws that structure societies also structure individual minds. The law of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This means all matter, all energy, all consciousness exists in a state of motion at different frequencies. Your thoughts have vibration. Your emotions have frequency. Your actions create waves. The law of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Hot and cold are the same thing at different degrees. Love and hate are the same emotion at different intensities. Success and failure are the same process at different stages. The law of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. When something goes to the extreme right, it must swing back to the left. This is why oppression creates revolution. Why excess creates collapse. Why imbalance creates correction. The law of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. Nothing happens by chance. What appears as luck or coincidence is simply the law operating beyond your current perception. Your current reality is the effect of past causes. Your current actions are creating future effects. The law of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has masculine and feminine principles. This isn't about biological sex. This is about the creative polarity that exists in all things. Masculine is projective, which is active and giving. Feminine is receptive, which is nurturing and growing. Both are necessary for creation. Now remember the key. These 7 laws don't just describe reality. They are the operating system of reality. They're the software that runs on the hardware of existence. And when we look at how ancient civilizations built their structures, how melanin molecules are organized, how computers operate, and how properly functioning minds work, we see these same 7 principles encoded at every level. The pyramids of Kemet, what they call Egypt, are not just tombs. That's the cover story. They're massive computers, energy generators, consciousness amplifiers, and they're built according to the exact proportions of the human body and the human mind. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north within 1/15 of a degree. Its base perimeter divided by its height equals 2 pi, the mathematical constant that describes circles and cycles. The king's chamber is positioned at the exact height that corresponds to the human heart. The passageways correspond to the human spine and nervous system. This isn't coincidence. This is deliberate encoding of the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As the cosmos, so the temple. As the temple, so the human body. As the human body, so the human mind. Ancient Kemetic temples were designed as microcosms of the universe and macrocosms of the human being. When initiates walked through these temples, they were walking through a map of consciousness itself. Each chamber represented a different level of awareness. Each passage represented a transition in understanding. The architecture was teaching them how to structure their minds. The Temple of Luxor, when overlaid on the human body, aligns perfectly with the skeletal structure, the organs, and the energy centers. The entrance corresponds to the feet. The central court corresponds to the solar plexus. The inner sanctuary corresponds to the pineal gland. Why? Because the ancients understood that consciousness and structure are inseparable. To teach someone how to think properly, you build a physical structure that embodies proper thinking. You make the abstract concrete. You make the mental material. This is cognitive architecture made physical. And here's what's crucial. These structures were built by melanated people who understood that melanin itself operates according to these same principles. They weren't copying nature, they were expressing their own biological blueprint in stone. Melanin, at the molecular level, is a semiconducting polymer. When observing its makeup, we will find that its chemical structure is highly resembling of an electric circuit board. Carbon atoms arranged in hexagonal patterns, the same geometry found in sacred architecture, in crystal structures, in the fabric of space-time itself. When scientists examine melanin under electron microscopes, they see structures that look like computer chips. Organized, geometric, efficient, capable of processing information, storing memory, conducting energy, and responding to electromagnetic frequencies. This is not metaphor. This is measurable reality. Melanin can convert light into energy, like solar panels. It can store and retrieve information, like memory chips. It can process multiple signals simultaneously, like quantum computers. It can self-repair and regenerate, like biological systems. It can respond to and emit electromagnetic frequencies, like transceivers. The 7 Hermetic laws are encoded in melanin's structure. Think of the first law of mentalism. Melanin responds to consciousness. Your thoughts literally affect melanin production and function. Stress degrades it. Peace optimizes it. When it comes to correspondence, melanin exists at every scale, in cells, in organs, in the skin, in the brain, wrapped around atoms dispersed through space. The same molecule, the same pattern, at every level. Then there is the law of vibration. Melanin absorbs all frequencies of light and sound. It vibrates in response to external stimuli and generates its own frequencies. Then there is the law of polarity. Melanin operates through electron exchange, positive and negative charges creating current, creating energy, creating function. As far as rhythm, melanin production follows circadian rhythms, seasonal cycles, and developmental stages. It flows in waves throughout your life. As far as the law of cause and effect, what you put into your body, food, chemicals, emotions, directly causes changes in melanin structure and function. Every action creates a melanin reaction. Finally, when it comes to the law of gender, melanin production is influenced by both androgenic, which is masculine, and estrogenic, which is feminine hormones. Both are necessary for optimal function. This is the same blueprint, the same architecture, from cosmic temples to molecular circuits. And black brains, packed with neuromelanin, is the highest expression of this architecture. Your consciousness is literally running on melanin hardware programmed with Hermetic software. Now let's take a closer look at computers, which is the modern technology that the enemy pretends is new innovation, yet it's actually just copying ancient Kemetic science. Computer architecture is based on the same 7 principles. Mentalism is the operating system. The operating system is the mind of the computer. It's the software layer that interprets commands and manages resources. Without consciousness, without an operating system, the hardware is inert. Correspondence is the fractal structure. Computers operate through hierarchical layers. At every scale, from circuits to chips to motherboards to networks, the same organizational patterns repeat. As above, which is the network architecture, and so below, which is the circuit design. Vibration is the electrical current. Computers work through the movement of electrons. Everything is vibration, electrical pulses at specific frequencies creating signals, creating data, creating output. Polarity is the binary code. The entire digital world runs on binary, 1 and 0, on and off, positive and negative. This is the law of polarity made computational. Every complex program reduces to billions of simple either or decisions. Rhythm is the clock cycles. Computers operate in rhythmic pulses. The CPU clock determines how fast operations occur. Everything happens in cycles: fetch, decode, execute, repeat. Rhythm creates processing. Cause and effect is the input-output. Every input causes an output. Every command creates a result. Computers are deterministic cause and effect machines. Change the input, change the output. Gender is power and data. Computer systems require both power, which is masculine and projective, and data, which is feminine and receptive. Power without data is useless energy. Data without power is inert information. Both must combine to create function. Now here's the revelation. Humans didn't invent these principles. We discovered them by studying nature. We discovered them by studying melanin. We discovered them by studying consciousness. Every computer ever built is a crude attempt to replicate what melanin does naturally. Every AI system is trying to mimic what neuromelanin achieves effortlessly. Every circuit board is copying the molecular architecture of black biological tissue. The enemy tries to build artificial melanin because he doesn't have enough natural melanin. And just like they built Washington, D.C. as a copy of Kemet, with obelisks and domes and Masonic geometry, they also built computers as copies of melanated consciousness. The architecture is stolen. The blueprint is plagiarized. The knowledge is appropriated. But here's what they can't copy: the proper use of the architecture. The correct cognitive framework to operate these systems wisely. The enemy is not your neighbor who happens to be white. The enemy is not the individual Caucasian person trying to live their life. The enemy is the system of white supremacy, the structural, institutional, cultural, and economic apparatus designed to maintain control over melanated people worldwide. In order to decode the architecture of this race-based system, we need to understand what makes us, the black race, fundamentally different. Not inferior, not superior, but simply different. As stated in previous episodes, melanin is not just pigment. It's a semiconductor and superconductor that permeates every level of existence. From the subatomic particles in your cells to the stars in the galaxy, melanin is the black substance that orchestrates motion, captures light, and processes information. When they teach you about electrons, protons, and neutrons in school, they're teaching you about melanin particles. But they never use that word. They never tell you that chemistry, chemi meaning black, is literally the study of blackness. They never tell you that Kemet, ancient Egypt, means the land of the blacks, and that all of Western science is based on knowledge stolen from black civilizations. Your neuromelanin, the melanin in your brain, is what produces DMT, the molecule of supernatural perception. It's what connects you to ancestral wisdom, heightens intuition, enhances creativity, improves memory, and provides access to states of consciousness that others simply cannot reach. This is why the pineal gland has been called the seat of the soul. Not because of the gland itself, but because of the neuromelanin inside it. You are walking around as the universe's most advanced supercomputer in your skull and body, and yet the enemy has spent centuries convincing you that you're broken, that you're less than, that you need his medicine, his validation, and his systems to survive. This is not random. This is not a coincidence. This is a coordinated warfare system with one objective: keep melanated people mentally dissociated, economically dependent, and spiritually disconnected. The system operates like a switchboard with infinite toggles. Each toggle represents a different trauma mechanism. They can turn up the economic pressure here, increase the chemical assault there, trigger an emotional landmine over here, deploy a physical hazard over there, all calibrated to keep you in a perpetual state of survival mode. Never able to build, never able to organize, never able to rise. But here's what they don't want you to know. Once you see the pattern, once you understand the system, you can build around it. You can create structures they can't infiltrate. You can develop economies they can't control. You can establish institutions they can't destroy. That's what knowing your enemy gives you. Not hatred, not rage. Clarity, strategy, the ability to move with precision. If proper cognitive architecture is the foundation for building successful individuals, families, communities, and civilizations, then the enemy's primary tactic must be distort the cognitive architecture. Make people think incorrectly. Make them perceive reality incorrectly. Make them process information incorrectly. Make them organize their thoughts incorrectly. This is what MKUltra accomplished on an individual level, and what has been scaled to society. The most optimal solution to dismantling white supremacy is to completely separate and disengage from it. It is to create a completely sovereign economic system outside of the enemy's capitalistic control. The foundational Black American, however, has always been trained to economically benefit everyone but themselves by pulling on the strings of their sense of morality and weaponizing it against them. When immigrants come to America, what's the first thing they do? They cluster together. They create ethnic enclaves. Chinatown, Little Italy, Koreatown, Little Havana. They pool their resources. They hire each other. They buy from each other. They lend to each other and they invest in each other. This isn't racism. This isn't exclusion for the sake of hatred. This is survival economics. This is understanding that the majority population will always prioritize their own, so you must create a parallel economy that prioritizes yours. The Jewish community perfected this. They built their own banks when mainstream banks wouldn't lend to them. They created their own distribution networks when they were excluded from others. They established their own media companies, law firms, hospitals, and schools. Today, despite being roughly 2% of the U.S. population, Jewish Americans have disproportionate influence in finance, media, entertainment, and politics, not always because of conspiracy, but because of coordinated group economics. The Chinese community does the same thing. Chinese business owners hire Chinese employees who live in Chinese neighborhoods, who send their kids to Chinese supplemental schools, who bank at Chinese credit unions, who invest in Chinese-owned businesses. The dollar circulates 28 times within their community before leaving. That's how you build generational wealth. The Korean community came to America after the Korean War with nothing. Within one generation, they owned thousands of businesses through rotating savings and credit associations called GAY. Every member contributes to a pot, and each month, one member gets the full pot to start or expand a business. No banks. No interest. No outside dependency. Pure group economics. Even the Italian mafia, for all its criminality, understood the principle. We take care of our own, we build our own systems, and we never rely on outsiders for survival. But when Black people talk about doing the same thing, we're called divisive. We're called racist. We're told we need to integrate, to be inclusive, to prove we're not like those other groups who self-segregate. Do you see the game? Every other ethnic group is allowed, encouraged, even, to practice group economics. But the moment Black people try to do it, we're hit with psychological warfare designed to make us feel guilty for prioritizing our own survival. Why? Because they know what happens when we practice group economics. They know what happens when we stop being their consumer base. They know what happens when we stop being their labor force. They know what happens when we stop being their revenue stream. They know that if Black people in America truly separated economically, we would immediately become one of the wealthiest groups on the planet. Right now, Black Americans have a collective buying power of over $1.8 trillion. Let me say that again, $1.8 trillion in annual spending. That's more than the GDP of entire nations. That's more than South Korea. That's more than Mexico. That's more than Australia. But where does that money go? It circulates in our community for 6 hours and then leaves. It goes to white-owned businesses, Asian-owned businesses, Arab-owned businesses, anyone except us. Imagine if we circulated that dollar just 3 times. Just 3 times before it left. We would create $5.4 trillion in economic activity within our own community. We would have the capital to build our own banks, our own hospitals, our own schools, our own factories, our own distribution networks. We would become economically independent. And economic independence is the foundation for political power, social power, and cultural power. That's why they don't want us to do it. That's why every time we've tried Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Rosewood in Florida, the thriving Black business districts that existed in every major city before integration, they burned it down. But here's the thing. They can't burn down a decentralized digital economy. They can't bomb a blockchain. They can't lynch an algorithm. For the first time in modern history, we have the tools to build an uninfiltratable economic system. Blockchain technology is a decentralized digital ledger that records transactions across multiple computers. No single entity controls it. No government can shut it down. No bank can freeze your accounts. No infiltrator can embezzle the funds. Every transaction is transparent, cryptographically secured, and permanently recorded. The data is immutable, it cannot be altered or deleted. This means we can create an entire economic ecosystem that operates outside of traditional financial systems. We can create our own currency that only circulates within the FBA community. We can create smart contracts that automatically execute agreements without lawyers or middlemen. We can create decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, that make collective decisions without corrupt leadership. And when we combine blockchain with artificial intelligence, we create systems that can automatically verify FBA lineage and membership. Track every dollar to ensure it stays within the community. Identify and flag infiltrators or bad actors. Optimize resource allocation based on community needs. Predict and prevent economic sabotage. Coordinate mass collective action with precision. Let's paint the picture of what this could look like. We create an FBA cryptocurrency. Let's call it the FBA coin. Every foundational Black American can acquire FBA coin by verifying their lineage through genealogical records and DNA testing linked to American slavery. This creates an exclusive economic network. FBA coin can only be earned or spent within FBA-owned businesses and platforms. You want to buy groceries? FBA-owned grocery stores accept FBA coin. You need medical care? FBA-owned clinics accept FBA coin. You want entertainment? FBA-owned streaming platforms accept FBA coin. Every transaction is recorded on the blockchain, creating complete transparency. You can see exactly where the money is flowing. You can see which businesses are thriving. You can see where investments are needed. You can track economic health in real time. Smart contracts automatically enforce community standards. If a business is caught exploiting the community, the smart contract revokes their ability to accept FBA coin. If a member is proven to be an infiltrator, they're automatically removed from the network. No bureaucracy. No corruption. No appeals to external authority. AI monitors the entire ecosystem for threats. If someone tries to dump large amounts of FBA coin to destabilize the currency, the AI catches it. If someone tries to launder money out of the community, the AI flags it. If external entities try to manipulate the market, the AI identifies the pattern and alerts the community. You use this economic network to fund an FBA banking system that provides loans exclusively to FBA entrepreneurs and families. No more being denied mortgages. No more predatory interest rates. Your people lending to your people. An FBA education system that teaches real history, real science, real economics, and real skills. Your children learning from teachers who look like them, who understand their biology, who want to see them succeed. An FBA legal system that provides representation, advocacy, and protection. Lawyers who specialize in defending FBA interests against systemic injustice. An FBA healthcare system that understands melanin-based medicine. Doctors who won't overprescribe antipsychotics. Hospitals that won't use you as guinea pigs. Clinics that focus on prevention and natural healing. An FBA media ecosystem that controls your own narrative. No more waiting for Hollywood to tell your stories. No more begging for representation. You create your own films, music, news, and content platforms. An FBA political party that coordinates voting as a bloc, endorses candidates who commit to FBA-specific reparations and policies, and holds them accountable through economic leverage. An FBA defense network that monitors threats, coordinates legal responses to injustice, tracks hate crimes and police violence, and organizes rapid community response. All of this, operating on blockchain and AI infrastructure that cannot be infiltrated, cannot be shut down, and cannot be controlled by external forces. This is not science fiction. This is completely possible with existing technology. The Chinese government already uses blockchain for supply chain management. El Salvador already uses Bitcoin as legal tender. DAOs already manage hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto assets. The technology exists. The capital exists within our community. The only thing missing is collective will and coordinated action. Some of you are thinking, this sounds good, but is it realistic? Can we really do this? Let me remind you of history. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, Black people went from enslaved to economically thriving in less than one generation. We built schools, universities, banks, hospitals, newspapers, and businesses. We elected Black politicians to Congress. We created entire prosperous communities from nothing. Then came the backlash. Jim Crow laws, black codes, convict leasing, sharecropping, the KKK. Systematic terror designed to strip away everything we built. But even under Jim Crow, we still created economic powerhouses. Black Wall Street in Tulsa was so prosperous that it was called the Negro Wall Street of America. Black residents owned grocery stores, hotels, theaters, newspapers, libraries, schools, hospitals, and even an airport. The Greenwood District was thriving. In 1921, a white mob, backed by local government and deputized citizens, burned it all to the ground. They dropped firebombs from airplanes. They machine-gunned black residents in the streets. They killed an estimated 300 people and left 10,000 homeless. Insurance companies refused to pay claims. The government never prosecuted a single attacker. This happened in Rosewood, Florida, in Ocoee, Florida, in Wilmington, North Carolina, in East St. Louis, Illinois. Over and over again, whenever black communities achieved economic independence, they were destroyed. Why? Because they knew what we could become. They knew that economic power translates to political power. They knew that once we controlled our own resources, we would be impossible to subjugate. That's a primary reason why the enemy had no problem with integration being pushed so hard in the 1960s. Not because white people suddenly developed morality, but because they realized that having us scattered throughout their economy was safer than having us concentrated in our own. Integration killed black business districts across America. Once we could shop at white stores, eat at white restaurants, and live in white neighborhoods, we abandoned our own. The dollar that used to circulate in our community 10, 15, 20 times before leaving, now it leaves immediately. We celebrated integration as progress while our economic base collapsed. And they smiled because they knew exactly what they were doing. But here's what's different now. We can't burn down the internet. We can't lynch a blockchain. We can't bomb a decentralized network. For the first time in history, we can build economic systems that are physically impossible to destroy through traditional means. No mob can come and burn it down. No government can seize the assets. No infiltrator can embezzle the treasury. The technology has leveled the playing field in a way that has never existed before. Now that we have the solution, let's address the obstacles. Because there will certainly be obstacles. Obstacle 1, internal division. The crab-in-a-barrel mentality. The I got mine, you get yours mentality. The colorism. The classism. The regionalism. The generational trauma that makes us distrust each other more than we distrust our oppressors. This is by design. Trauma fragments communities just like it fragments minds. When you're in survival mode, cooperation feels like vulnerability. When you've been betrayed repeatedly, trust feels like weakness. But here's the solution. Transparent systems eliminate the trust problem. With blockchain, you don't have to trust the treasurer because every transaction is visible. With smart contracts, you don't have to trust the leadership because the rules are automated. With AI monitoring, you don't have to trust your neighbor because bad actors are identified and removed systematically. We don't need to fix every individual's trauma before we build. We build systems that work despite the trauma. Then there is obstacle 2, which is infiltration. They will send agents. They will send provocateurs. They will send people who look like us, talk like us, and claim to be about liberation while sabotaging from within. This has been the case with every black liberation movement. COINTELPRO infiltrated the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, the Civil Rights Movement, etc. They sent informants. They planted drugs. They spread misinformation. They assassinated leaders. But here's the solution. Verification systems. Genealogical records tied to blockchain. DNA verification for membership. AI behavioral analysis that identifies bad actors based on patterns rather than accusations. Multi-signature requirements for major decisions so no single person can sabotage the whole. Make infiltration so difficult and so transparent that it becomes impossible to operate undetected. Obstacle 3, government suppression. They will try to regulate cryptocurrency to death. They will try to classify it as securities. They will try to make it illegal. They will try to seize assets. But here's the solution. Decentralization and international infrastructure. Put servers in multiple countries. Use peer-to-peer networks that don't rely on centralized platforms. Operate with the same sophistication that illegal markets use, but for legal purposes. The government can't stop Bitcoin, and they've been trying for over a decade. They can't stop encrypted communication. They can't stop decentralized networks. The technology is too robust, too distributed, too resilient. Then there is obstacle 4, psychological warfare. They will call you racist for prioritizing your own community. They will call you divisive. They will call you extremist. They will trot out black faces to tell you that separation is going backwards, that you're hurting progress, that you're no better than the people who oppressed you. But here's the solution. Know that every other ethnic group does this without apology. Know that your survival is not subject to their approval. Know that your liberation does not require their permission. When they call you racist, point to Chinatown. Point to Little Italy. Point to Koreatown. Point to the Jewish community's economic networks. Ask them why it's acceptable for everyone else but not for you. And when they can't answer, move forward anyway. Obstacle 5 is economic retaliation. They will try to cut off resources. They will try to freeze bank accounts. They will try to deny business licenses. They will try to audit, investigate, and harass anyone participating in the system. But here's the solution. That's exactly why you're building a parallel economy that doesn't depend on their banks, their licenses, or their approval. The whole point is to create economic independence, which means their economic retaliation has diminishing power the more you build. Every dollar that circulates within your system is a dollar they can't control. Every business that operates on FBA coin is a business they can't strangle through banking restrictions. Every family that becomes economically self-sufficient is a family they can't leverage through poverty. Let me be clear about something. This is not optional. This is not a preference. This is survival. The system of white supremacy is not going to reform itself. It's not going to wake up one day and decide to treat you fairly. It's not going to stop poisoning your food, your water, your medicine. It's not going to stop targeting your children with vaccines that cause neurological damage. It's not going to stop incarcerating black men at rates that exceed apartheid South Africa. It's not going to stop extracting wealth from your community while returning nothing. You cannot integrate into a system designed to destroy you. You cannot reform a system whose entire foundation is your subjugation. You cannot appeal to the morality of people who see you as a resource to be exploited rather than human beings to be respected. The only solution is separation. Not physical separation necessarily, though that may come, but economic separation, cultural separation, institutional separation, psychological separation. You must build your own systems that prioritize your survival, your prosperity, your children's future. This is what every other group understands instinctively. They come to America and immediately create parallel economies because they know that survival requires self-sufficiency. They know that depending on others for your basic needs is slavery by another name. But we've been psychologically conditioned to see separation as defeat. We've been trained to see integration as progress. We've been programmed to seek validation from the very people who have enslaved us for 400 years and profit from our dysfunction. Meanwhile, they practice group economics without apology. They hire their own. They buy from their own. They invest in their own. And they get richer while we get poorer, all while telling us that we're divisive for suggesting we do the same. The moral imperative is clear. You have a duty to your ancestors who died building this country for free. You have a duty to your children who deserve to inherit wealth instead of trauma. You have a duty to yourself to live in dignity rather than dependence. Economic separation is not hatred. It's self-love. It's self-preservation. It's self-determination. What we must do now is support FBA-specific initiatives. There are already people building the infrastructure for economic separation. They're creating FBA verification systems. They're developing economic platforms. They're organizing collective action. Find them. Support them. Join them. Whether it's with money, time, skills, or simply spreading the word. The infrastructure won't build itself, and it won't be built by people who don't share your specific historical experience and interests. Start practicing economic separation and stop funding your own oppression. Right now, today, we can start practicing group economics. Seek out Black-owned businesses for your grocery shopping, your dining, your services, your entertainment. Use directories like Eat Okra, Official Black Wall Street, and By Black Movement to find them. Yes, it might be less convenient. Yes, it might cost a little more sometimes. But every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of economy you want to live in. If enough of us commit to circulating our dollar within the community just 2 or 3 times before it leaves, we would see massive economic shifts within months. As far as generational wealth, we must teach the next generation. Our children need to understand group economics from childhood. They need to understand that every other successful ethnic group practices it. They need to understand the warfare system designed to keep them dependent. They need to understand their biological difference and advantage. Teach them financial literacy. Teach them entrepreneurship. Teach them cognitive coding and technology. Teach them their real history. Teach them to think in terms of collective advancement rather than individual integration. The next generation will inherit whatever system we build or fail to build. I want us to imagine this future. You wake up in a home you purchased through an FBA credit union with a mortgage specifically designed for foundational Black Americans. The interest rate is low because the credit union's purpose is community building, not profit extraction. You buy your groceries from an FBA-owned grocery store that sources from FBA-owned farms. The food is organic, nutrient-dense, and calibrated for melanin-rich biology. No synthetic additives. No chemical warfare disguised as food. You send your kids to an FBA-operated school where they learn real history. They learn about the African kingdoms that created mathematics, architecture, and astronomy. They learn about the melanin in their bodies and how to optimize its function. They learn financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and technology. They're taught by teachers who understand their biology, their culture, and their potential. You work for an FBA-owned company, or you run your own FBA-registered business. Your income is paid in FBA coin, which you spend within the FBA economic network. The money circulates 15, 20 times within the community before leaving. Every transaction builds collective wealth. When you need health care, you go to an FBA-owned clinic where doctors practice melanin-based medicine. They don't overprescribe pharmaceuticals. They focus on prevention, nutrition, and natural healing. They understand that your biology is different and requires different approaches. Your entertainment comes from FBA-owned platforms. Movies that show you as royalty, as geniuses, as heroes. Music that uplifts rather than degrades. News that tells the truth about your history and your current struggles. Content that edifies rather than destroys. Your banking is done through FBA financial institutions that invest in FBA communities. Your savings go toward building FBA infrastructure. Your loans go to FBA entrepreneurs. Your retirement funds grow FBA generational wealth. You vote as part of an FBA political bloc that has real power because it's backed by economic leverage. Politicians who want FBA support must commit to FBA-specific policies. Reparations, hate crime legislation, police reform, educational investment. And if they renege, the economic pressure comes down hard. Your community is safe because there's an FBA-operated security network that responds to threats, monitors hate crimes, and protects businesses. Not to entirely replace police, but to supplement and hold them accountable. Your elderly are cared for in FBA-owned senior centers and nursing homes where they're treated with dignity and respect, not warehoused and neglected. Your legal issues are handled by FBA legal networks that specialize in defending against systemic injustice and know all the tactics. This is not fantasy. This is completely achievable with the resources we already have and the technology that already exists. This is what every other successful ethnic group has built for themselves. This is what we had before integration destroyed it. This is what we can have again, but better, because now we have tools that make it nearly impossible to destroy. In closing, let me ask you a question. If someone has been poisoning your food for generations, would you keep buying groceries from them? If someone has been sabotaging your education, would you keep sending your children to their schools? If someone has been weaponizing medicine against your body's biology, would you keep going to their hospitals? The answer should be obvious. Yet somehow, when it comes to economics, we're told that separation is radical. We're told that building our own systems is divisive. We're told that group economics is reverse racism. But this isn't about bigotry and hatred. It's not even just about money. This is about survival. This is about freedom. This is about taking back control of the very operating system they've been using to control us. You have a choice. You can continue participating in an economy that extracts your wealth, destroys your health, miseducates your children, incarcerates your men, traumatizes your women, and keeps you in a perpetual state of dependence and survival mode. Or you can start building an alternative. You can continue waiting for the system to reform, for reparations to come, for justice to be served, for integration to finally work, for them to see you as human. Or you can recognize that your liberation will never come from your oppressor and start building it yourself. You can continue believing that group economics is divisive, that separation is backwards, that you need to prove you're not like those other groups who practice economic tribalism. Or you can recognize that every successful ethnic group in America practices group economics because it works, and there's no moral high ground in poverty. You can continue circulating your dollar outside your community, funding everyone else's prosperity while your own community crumbles. Or you can commit to circulating your dollar within the community, building wealth that your children and grandchildren will inherit. You can continue trusting institutions that have shown you, repeatedly, that they do not have your best interests at heart. Or you can build institutions that are designed from the ground up to prioritize your survival and prosperity. The choice is yours. But understand this. Neutrality is a choice in favor of the status quo. Inaction is a choice in favor of continued subjugation. There is no fence to sit on. You're either building the alternative or you're complicit in your own exploitation. Knowing yourself, understanding your biology, your history, your potential, gives you the foundation to build. Knowing your enemy, understanding his systems, his tactics, his warfare patterns, gives you the strategy to build effectively. And knowing that every other ethnic group does this successfully gives you the proof that it works. The technology exists. The resources exist within our community. The historical precedent exists. The moral imperative exists. The only question is, do you have the will? Do you have the courage, the vision, the discipline, and the commitment to separate from your 400-year-old open enemy? If the answer is yes, then let's build. If the answer is no, then accept that you've chosen continued dependence and stop complaining about the predictable results. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Choose quickly. Because while we debate and deliberate, every other ethnic group is building wealth, consolidating power, and securing their children's futures. And the system designed to extract from us is perfecting its tactics. The time for economic separation is now. The tools are available. The knowledge is spreading. The consciousness is rising. All that's missing is you and your mind. Remember the MK Ultra techniques of hypnotic mind control. Bypass mental defenses, which means to disable critical thinking. Erase existing memories, which means to destroy historical consciousness. Erase personality, which means to fragment identity. Alter behavior, which means to change natural responses. Obstruct cognition, which means to block clear thinking. Prolong or deprive sleep, which means to disrupt natural rhythms. Sensory isolation or overstimulation, which means to disconnect from reality. These techniques produce impaired cognition, which means we can't think clearly. Increase suggestibility, which means we easily accept false programming. Regress childlike state, which means we are unable to organize complexity. Hallucination, which means we constantly perceive false realities. Memory loss, which means we are disconnected from the law of cause and effect. Disorientation, which means we have no mental map of reality. Notice what this does. It destroys your ability to apply the 7 Hermetic principles to your life. It destroys mentalism. You stop believing your thoughts create reality. You become passive, waiting for external saviors. It destroys correspondence. You can't see patterns. You can't connect individual problems to systemic causes. You can't scale solutions from small to large. It destroys vibration. You're locked in low-frequency states like fear, anxiety, depression, survival mode. You can't access higher frequencies of creativity, vision, and power. It destroys polarity. You see everything as either or instead of recognizing it's all the same thing at different degrees. This creates rigid thinking, false dichotomies, and inability to transform negative to positive. It destroys rhythm. You're stuck in one extreme, constant stress or constant passivity. You can't flow. You can't adapt. You can't ride cycles. It destroys cause and effect. You can't trace consequences back to origins. You can't predict outcomes. You make the same mistakes repeatedly because you can't see the causal chain. It destroys gender. You have hormonal imbalances, men with excess estrogen, women with excess testosterone. The creative polarity within you is disrupted, making you unable to both generate ideas, which is masculine, and nurture them to fruition, which is feminine. This is trauma-based cognitive sabotage. The enemy isn't just traumatizing you to hurt you. He's traumatizing you to scramble your mental architecture so that you can't build. If we understand the law of mentalism, meaning that collective consciousness creates collective reality, then we know that changing minds must come before changing structures. But if your cognitive architecture is distorted, you keep trying to reform external systems without addressing internal programming, and we wonder why nothing changes. Study the 7 Hermetic principles deeply. Not surface level. Not just memorizing the words. But actually understand how the enemy has deployed these principles to operate the warfare terrain in which we live. Study Kemetic science. Learn sacred geometry. Understand that these aren't abstract philosophical ideas. They are physical engineering principles for civilization, as well as cognitive frameworks for mental consciousness. Moreover, learn to practice pattern recognition. Train yourself to see correspondence and how the same patterns repeat at different scales. Look at how a family operates and see how it mirrors how organizations operate. Look at how cells function and see how it mirrors how societies function. Look at how trauma affects individuals and see how it mirrors the way that oppression affects communities. Once you can see the patterns of the enemy at one level, you can apply the solution at all levels.